Can you lie to your boss about where you are as a digital nomad? Interesting question. Being a digital nomad is absolutely amazing, but there are going to be plenty of people who don't understand your choices. Now, this can come from a variety of reasons. Now, it could be that they're jealous, it could be that they don't understand your lifestyle, and it could be, honestly, some legitimate concerns if you're not doing your job up to snuff. But in the life of almost every digital nomad, in a work context, someone is going to ask you where you are. Most of the time, they're going to ask this question because they're genuinely curious. I mean, you're living this incredible life where you're in one country one week and one country the next, so people genuinely have an interest. But every now and then, either a boss or a colleague or potentially even a client might start asking just so they can use it against you later. So, when this comes up or if you feel like this is happening, what do? Well, in this video, I'm going to tell you not only how to address and answer the question, I'm actually going to tell you how you can normally just avoid the question altogether. Let's jump in. We both know you're working hard, but to others, it may seem as though you're not. Oftentimes, if people are aware of what you're doing, even though your consistency and your delivery and the quality of what you're delivering are still the same, any small mistakes that you make may be amplified, and people may attribute it to the fact that you're traveling all the time. Now, to be fair, until you settle into your routine, there may be some validity to this. If you're not able to get to your office consistently, you're showing up late to meetings, you've got surfboards in the background, and you're in the middle of a party all the time with clients, okay, maybe this is starting to be a little bit detrimental to your life. But once you lock in and you understand exactly how you operate in this context, there should be absolutely no difference between being on the other side of the wall and the other side of the world. So let's get to the exact question. Should you lie to your boss or your colleagues when they ask you where you are? In general, the answer is no. I mean, most people will have no issue with what you're doing as long as you're consistently delivering. But there may be certain circumstances where being overly forthcoming might not be what you want. Now, there's one school of thought that says your employer doesn't own you. It's none of their business. You can tell them whatever you want. And sometimes I personally tell people that I'm in a different place when I just don't want to deal with the whole question of where I am. But in general, it's better just to avoid the question altogether. And if you know that someone's friendly and they're asking purely because they're interested, absolutely tell them you're not doing anything wrong. So you might be asking yourself, Mike, you just said to avoid the question altogether. Well, how the heck do you do that? Well, here are a couple of quick strategies and tips so you don't ever have to answer the question. Let's start with the most basic. For my core job, 60 to 70% of the time, I am on either internal calls or client calls. So what do? I always use the same virtual background. It's not a blur effect. It's a consistent background. And the only thing that they see change each time I log on is my clothes. I always make sure that I'm in a place where there is something of a solid wall behind me so people aren't walking in and out constantly. Although if people do see other people walking around in the background, they normally just assume you're in a co-working space. The other thing that I do is make sure that I'm in a place that is relatively quiet. A little bit of noise is totally fine, but the sounds of waves crashing or music in a cafe or anything of the sort starts to make people notice that you might not be in a traditional office setting or in your house. The good news is almost all conferencing software now has this functionality. Whether you use Google Meet or Zoom or Blue Jeans or any of the other myriad things out there, they all have virtual backgrounds. So definitely start making use of it if you're not already. Depending on your skin tone, there may be a couple of instances where if you kind of match up with the wall behind you, it starts to get a little wonky, but that's something that people understand. It just kind of happens, and it creates a couple of funny situations. The next thing I do to make sure that I never even have to answer that question of where I am is I don't ask other people where they are. Reciprocity dictates that if you ask someone where they are, they're going to ask you in return. So just don't even bring it up. Just jump into what you have to talk about, skip that part of the pleasantries, and get to work. The next thing that I do is I constantly use a VPN, and I almost always log in from the exact same location. Even if I'm actually in the country that people think I'm in, I'm still going to use the same VPN location. It just creates consistency, and oftentimes there are certain websites where if you access them from a different place, the admin can get a ping and understand that you're not exactly where they thought you were. Quick disclaimer here on everything that I'm saying. If you work for a company where you need to be physically present in a specific country for security reasons or regulations or anything, you definitely shouldn't go and you shouldn't lie about it and you shouldn't do any of this stuff. Make sure that with your employer, you're actually good to be in a different place. Definitely don't want to get in any security problems if you work for a top secret or highly classified company. The other thing to remember here is that you still need to keep your same time zone. Just because you're in Europe doesn't mean that you can work 9 to 5 European hours, at least for most things that people do as digital nomads. If your job requires you to be there 9 to 5, you need to be there 9 to 5 in whatever time zone that is. For example, if you're sitting in Paris, you might start your workday at 3 and end at 11, which has its own myriad of absolute advantages. You get the whole morning to yourself and you can pretty much stay out as late as you want without fear of being hungover or anything for the next day. That said, it's still your responsibility to ensure that you're showing up on time, getting your work done, and adhering to all your responsibilities. Now, there are going to be people who find you absolutely fascinating because of all your travel experiences, and they'll probably always remember you because of it. That can cut both ways. In my personal experience, I generally think before I start telling someone about all the travel that I do in a professional setting, does this person actually need to know this? Or do I actually want to tell them about this? Because sometimes keeping it simple just keeps life way, way easier. And sometimes the best move is to not overcomplicate things by oversharing. That said, I highly encourage you to get out there, go explore, see everything the world has to offer. Just make sure you're taking care of your stuff. There's so much out there to see. If you want to find some of your ideal destinations or other digital nomad tips, stay tuned. We're coming out with content all the time about this stuff.